Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live session where we will be discussing the digital economy and how it's accelerating private sector development in the Caribbean. I am Kayla Grant, and I'm from the Inter-American Development Bank, the Competitiveness Innovation Division, and I am joined here today by our two experts on the topic. I have here with me Marjorie Straw.
Hi, Kayla.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. She's a manager of corporate initiatives at the Jamaica Promotions Corporation. And I'm also joined here today by Sylvia Donert.
Hey, Kayla.
Hi, Sylvia. And she is the Executive Director of Compete Caribbean, and she's also a lead private sector development specialist here at the bank as well. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Welcome to our live discussion. And also, welcome to everyone who's joining us today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to our discussion that we're going to have today. And now we'll dive right into it. Before we do, I just want to give a special thanks to our audience and to remind you, more importantly, that if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to use the comment section in order to send that over to us, and we'll get to your questions as soon as possible. And don't forget, please like the Inter-American Development Bank page on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest trends in international development. So Sylvia, let's start with you.
Okay.
Sure. So let's start this whole discussion by setting a framework about what the digital economy is. What exactly is it, and why should governments and the private sector pay attention or focus on this particular area?
Yeah. Well, Kayla, in this century, we've seen a wave of digitization and automation of economic activities, massive exchanges of data, more than ever. I mean, all of us own a smartphone. I'm sure that every person in the audience obviously owns a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, and we're all changing the ways that we exchange information, and that's really changing the world. No, there's a massive amount of data and massive connections between businesses, people, and data. Really, no. And the digital economy is a result of the economic activity that can result between all these massive connections.
Right.
No? And on top of that, you have new technologies like 3D printing, artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, all taking advantage of this massive interconnection of information and of people and of devices. Why should governments and the private sector adapt to it? First of all, it's changing the way that people do business, no? Because it's changing the way that we as consumers can relate to each other, and that we as consumers can relate to businesses, no? So business models are dramatically different than before. We've all heard the famous quote that Uber is the world's largest taxi service provider but owns not a single taxi. Airbnb is the world's largest accommodation provider but doesn't own a single hotel, although now they've bought one in Canada, I wanted to tell you. Facebook, you know, the most popular media outlet, produces no content. Alibaba, the world's most valuable retailer, has no inventory, etc. No? So this massive interconnection of data and of devices provide the ability to offer platforms of services to people across the world. And that gives businesses the opportunity to develop new products, to become more lucrative in the products that they're offering, to become a lot more efficient, and to usher in a new culture of much more sophisticated management. No? For governments, that's also a real opportunity. O sea, governments, the digital economy is changing the way that governments can relate to their citizens. It can make governments a lot more responsive to citizen needs, more efficient in the use of resources. Imagine governments using GPS, for example, to target police efforts to certain particular areas where the crime rate is particularly high, and so on. But also because the digital economy is going to completely transform the way that we do businesses, the way that people prepare for jobs and the activities of the future. It's very important for the government to offer the kinds of public goods that are necessary for businesses to really take advantage of this opportunity.
Right,
no?
right.
So technological infrastructure is super important, educational frameworks that really allow people to develop the skills to participate in this new economy. fiscal incentives to stimulate investment in this new economy, investment in research and development. Those are things that are very, very important. Aside from a regulatory framework that allows online privacy, invest in cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. For the Caribbean has typically been a region that has been, because of its geographical fragmentation, has always been very isolated. And the physical trading of goods has always been very costly. Mm-hmm. Now here we have a new technology where you can trade in services and in products that don't need a physical, necessarily a physical exchange. Mm-hmm. So suddenly you have the whole global demand at the push of a button. That's a great opportunity for businesses in the Caribbean, but it's also a great challenge in terms of governments being able to set the stage so that businesses can take advantage of
right,
this.
Exactly. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
We can touch on many different points
definitely.
there.
Yeah.
But let's stem back to where you're talking about the governments and what's happening in the Caribbean. So Marjorie, if you could, where's the Caribbean in all of this digital transformation that's taking place? And what are some of the factors that's facilitating tapping into the digital economy, as well as some of the challenges that Sylvia began tapping on?
Right, Kayla. Well, you know, the Caribbean, in spite of its unique characteristics, is not immune to what is happening with respect to the digital transformation. There's some, I think, interesting trends that are happening that we should take note of. So, for example, broadband connectivity has improved significantly across the region, up to 80% in some countries. There's been a steady increase in subscription for mobile phones. And so that creates an ideal platform for digital platforms to function. So that's also a very important trend. In Jamaica, for example, persons own 2 mobile phones. So, you know, to give you a sense of the level of penetration across the population. Thirdly, we have good literacy rates. And our population is young, so there is the opportunity to provide skilled labor, you know, to the market. And certainly there are opportunities to build capacity with respect to digital transformation. So those are some interesting trends that can be developed to respond adequately to the digital transformation, digital economy that's occurring. But there are some areas that we really have to look at closely to begin to address. Our GDP growth rate performance is worrisome. Right. Within the region, a recent IDB study suggested that if we continue with this sluggish rate of growth, that by 2020, the region will be something like 24% behind Latin America and some of the other small states. We absolutely need a strong macroeconomic system to support the potential investments that we could get in the region to support digital transformation.
Right. Very interesting. It sounds like the governments, and as well as the private sector, we have a lot of opportunities as well as challenges that we're facing here as we move towards this area. So maybe Sylvia, you could give us a few examples, because since we're talking about the private sector, maybe a few Caribbean firms that are helping to build this digital economy, and as well as some of their specific constraints that they're facing.
Okay. First, let me tell you that there are more than a few. In almost every country, even in the very small ones, there's at least one digital firm that's making great progress and changing ways that businesses work. So I have my cheat here and go through a few of them. So first of all, I'd like to mention Bit.com. Bit.com is like a very cutting edge firm. It's based in Barbados and in Trinidad. Mm-hmm. It's using blockchain technology to provide fast, reliable, and efficient financial transactions between people, and hopefully soon between businesses and people. And of course, using blockchain technology, which is supposedly the new technological paradigm that's going to affect how the fintech world at least is going to operate in the future. No? Right. Then we have this great Jamaican firm called BookFusion, and it's a firm that allows people that write Caribbean content, Caribbean authors that write Caribbean content for all ages, to sell and distribute and share both physical and digital books in their platform. We have a few firms that work in the agricultural sector, so like Rivo Farm in Jamaica, a firm called Farm in Trinidad and Tobago that are trying to both solve issues of using business analytics with large data to give producers information about markets, information about weather, but also to connect them with possible markets like the hotel industry. You know, there's always said in the Caribbean that the hotel industry doesn't buy enough locally and so on, and with the restaurant sector. There's firms that are working in the health sector. There's one in Barbados, for example, that's digitizing the whole health management system, including health information. It's like a huge issue. It's going to be using technology that's more advanced even than the one that's being used here in the United States. There are firms dedicated to gaming and using virtual reality and augmented reality in Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, for example. There's a firm that we're very proud of because Compete Caribbean helped support in Trinidad, which developed a shared workflow application on the cloud, and they won Microsoft Partner of the Year Award in 2016. Wow. Yeah. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also has a firm that helps to connect markets to local products, etc. So just to tell you that there are many, and it's just evidence that the sector is growing really fast.
Right.
But as it is growing, it's also encountering a lot of challenges. First of all, this is a sector that relies on swift and constant innovation. So it encounters the same regulatory challenges that other firms in the Caribbean have, like registering a business, et cetera, just that it's much more, the effect of slowing down the innovation is compounded, because these firms need to be like really agile. Big constraint for the sector is the poor capacity in the Caribbean to do e-commerce based on two things. One is that PayPal, Stripe, like your typical financial services that offer e-commerce, they do not cover the Caribbean, so you cannot do it on a Caribbean credit card. There are some countries in the Caribbean that allow you to do so, but with very small transactions, and it takes a lot of time. So this really inhibits the capacity of these firms to go global, no? And it's a pity. And the other thing is that there's a large unbanked population in the Caribbean. So that unbanked population is also a market that is not consuming digital services. And big opportunities, for example, Bit.com is trying to bank that market. The Digicel, and not necessarily in Jamaica, but in Haiti, for example, big initiative to try to use mobile phones, you know, to move around money and things like that.
Well, even the Bank of Jamaica is looking at fintech and looking at how to use blockchain. So
exactly.
There, yes.
Exactly. And another challenge that they face is a shortage of technical skills. So particularly in the very advanced technologies. But an anecdote that I wanted to post to you because I thought that it was a really interesting way of seeing how development could happen. Is that, for example, Bit.com, located in Barbados because the founder is a Barbadian. They didn't have the programmers in Barbados to really work on blockchain. All over the world, there are 14 jobs per person trained in blockchain. So there's a huge demand all over the world, not only in this case in Barbados because this firm decided to set up there. They started to bring in blockchain programmers, and then suddenly other firms in other parts of the world, like Canada and so on, want to move to Barbados because now there's a cluster of trained labor. And it's an opportunity for the Caribbean. I mean, imagine if, you know, apparently blockchain is not that difficult to learn. Imagine if the countries in the Caribbean were really like stimulating learning in blockchain coding and so on, how quickly this could take off.
Yeah. Great. Those are fascinating examples. I had no idea about some of those companies actually in the Caribbean, and I'm sure our audience might be surprised as well. And speaking of our audience, please, let's remember, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post them over to me. And also, we do have our publication. If you'd like to download it and find out more information about it, go ahead and do so. And we'll get to those questions. So I just have one more question. So since Sylvia was talking about the firms, Marjorie, you're from JamPro.
Yes.
And so could you tell us what Jamaica is doing in the realm of the digital economy and what sort of policies that's being implemented to encourage and to shape this digital transformation?
Sure, Kayla, thanks. Well, the government of Jamaica is embarking on an aggressive e-government policy.
Right.
Well, firstly, we have the overarching Vision 2030 National Development Plan that's meant to just support all the ICT transformation that's earmarked for the country by 2030. Then there is the Blueprint 2016 report. This report was produced by the CIO's office. And really what it does is it makes tangible recommendations for each area, ICT infrastructure, cybersecurity, governance, and one of the key points it makes is that policies should not be divorced from the government's operations. So when we think of digital transformation and digital economy, too often what governments tend to do is they create a policy and disconnect that from the operations of the ministries, departments, and agencies. And this is one of the strongest recommendations that report actually makes. In terms of the eGov, we have the gov.jm, which is the e-government's platform, and that's meant in 3 to 5 years, most of the government transactions will be conducted through that portal. Back office services are now going to be operating from shared services centers. Paying taxes is compulsory for large firms earning over 500 million Jamaican dollars, and the plan is to scale down to smaller firms as well. Trade across the region is leaning towards being paperless. In Jamaica, we implemented the Asikuda system, and that's making the entire trade facilitation and interface with customs more of an electronic interface than anything else. We also, government suppliers can now register with government and make their submissions electronically. And then one of our latest initiatives, the government of Jamaica is working on a smart city concept. Kingston is earmarked as one of the cities, and the work is targeted for the new Kingston, which is like the commercial financial hub of Kingston. What we've done to date is we've strengthened the grid in collaboration with JPS for a more reliable supply. They've converted some 300 streetlights into what they're referring to as smart lights. And really what this does is just adjust their brightness according to the degree of activity within a particular area. And they're also working towards having the traffic lights gauging, the flow of traffic to, high congestion times in traffic and so on. So quite a few exciting things are happening across government, actually.
Very nice. Go Jamaica. We'll definitely be keeping track of the progress
Thank you.
that you guys are making in this area. And now we have a few minutes left, so we'd like to start answering a few questions that we have from the audience. I'll start with Rishi Maharaj, who's from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hi, Rishi.
Hi, Rishi. And the question here is, how do we balance the digital economy with privacy concerns and upcoming regulations on this particular issue? Either one of you, but I know Sylvia had touched on it, but go ahead.
Well, I think, it's always an ongoing process, isn't it?
Right.
Because technology is always improving. So the government and the private sector, they have to be aware of the privacy concerns. The cybersecurity has to be in place to support that. But, no sooner than a new technology that's meant to provide the latest solution has been developed than something else is discovered that may thwart that process. So I think that government within its policies will have to be more agile, will have to be more responsive so that they can properly respond to privacy issues as they arise.
Right. That's an excellent point. And we'll take another question from Simona Joseph Olivier from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This question poses, how can the private sector promote the development and use of regional content in the digital economy? It's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I think that the example of book fusion is a very good one. The reason why I love it is because it's kind of like the intersection between digital economy and cultural content.
Right.
And I think that the Caribbean produces, we all know, a lot of cultural content, no? A very beautiful fashion, music, dance. YouTube, I mean, how many people make money on YouTube being bloggers and so on? And these are uni-person companies. So yes, I mean, the digital economy is certainly a way of not only providing the world with access to the cultural content of the Caribbean, but also monetizing upon that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And if I may add, Kayla, you know, I think of the founder of Jamoji. You know, there's so much live content,
Yes,
and the fact is, you know, we're such a creative group of people. In the case of Jamoji, it was just because she couldn't reconcile, you know, the emoticons with the language and the dialect. So she wanted something that resonated more with our culture. So to Sylvia's point, there's a plethora of content that we haven't even begun to tap into.
Yeah, I can give you another example of that. There's a firm in Trinidad and Tobago called Dingole Limited. And they had a virtual reality experience with a steel pan that was covered by the Huffington Post and everything. So it's like different ways of really incorporating the creativity, the culture of the Caribbean into the digital economy. There's a firm in St. Lucia that does gaming, and they incorporate some of the characters of the St. Lucian culture into their games. So there are many different ways to do it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Which leads us to another question. This is Irene Ratliff, from Belize. The question is a digital economy similar to marketing or e-commerce? And maybe perhaps an example or two.
I would say, I mean, there's a very, let's say, certainly the digital economy has transformed the way that people sell and market their products.
Right.
But the digital economy is a lot more than that. It's the ability to make products that are all digitally based.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So let's put an example, for example, of the tourism sector. You could use a digital economy through websites, Facebook, etc., to market your product much better. But now you can build an app that with augmented reality leads the tourists to different parts of your country and encourages them to visit there. You can have a scavenger hunt
Or a
that,
virtual tour,
that incorporates business people from the economy and where people get points. For example, like the Pokemon game. We did that actually, Compete Caribbean funded that in Grenada. And it's been a great success. So it's more than marketing and e-commerce.
Yeah, I agree with Sylvia, Kayla. I mean, when you think of the digital economy, marketing e-commerce is just one subset. I like to think of it, when I think of digital economy, I think of an integrated approach that has the infrastructure, the policies, the regulations, you know, in place, and with the necessary platforms to support private sector growth in that regard. And so, you know, that would just be one subset, but to Sylvia's point again, certainly when you're operating in that space, you're thinking of a totally digitized product or service.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That enhances a lot of the physical products and services that you have, or not. Maybe it's its own product or service.
As well.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And we're almost out of time. So finally, just a quick question for both of you. Can you please tell us about the work that the IDB and also JamPro is doing to promote this digital transformation of the private sector?
Who's first?
Well, let's go with you first.
Thank you, Kayla. Well, you know,
welcome.
JamPro is a big advocate for the digital economy because we believe that it is one of the transformative ways in which the country and the region, by extension, will become more competitive. One of the ways in which we're supporting this is that we're working on a national business portal. This will be housed through the gov.jm platform, and it will allow business to government transactions to be done, interfacing with government. What the portal will seek to do are mainly three things. One, it's going to simplify the way in which investors conduct business with the country. And it's going to provide them with simple and detailed instructions on how to do business with the country. Secondly, it's going to allow key government agencies to be aware, to be apprised of these developments when they occur, and to allow them to be responsive. And thirdly, it is going to allow local and foreign investors to register their investments interest or new projects that they believe are good investment projects on the website itself, on the portal itself. So that is one of the ways from a government standpoint that we are working on promoting the digital economy. The second one is just continued support for the private sector. We recently supported the IBM NCB Blue Hackathon, and this was just a fascinating experience where it allowed young persons, in a 24-hour marathon to come up with solutions related to financial services, literacy, access to credit. It was very exciting, and it just reminds us why it's so important to come up with solutions for the private sector to be able to compete effectively in this space.
Right, exactly. And Sylvia?
Well, first of all, I want to respond at three levels. At the level of the bank, at the level of our division, which is the Competitiveness and Innovation Division, and at the level of the Compete Caribbean program, which I lead from Barbados. No? So at the level of the bank, I think that the bank has realized that there's a huge technology divide between the Latin American, the Caribbean region, and advanced economies in the world. And since technology makes everything advance exponentially, it's urgent to be able to bridge that technological divide. And it's supporting its member countries with all kinds of resources to be able to bridge this divide. And those are go from infrastructure to skills formation to e-government and to support to the private sector. So that's at the level of the bank. At the level of the Competitiveness and Innovation Division, there's very large support for governments in Latin America and the Caribbean as well to be able to develop the set of instruments that can make the government support an ecosystem for innovation and that can support the transformation of the private sector to the digital economy. Okay, we were just coming from a conference where we're participating together called Riding the Digital Wave, and there are very interesting presentations from innovation agencies in advanced economies that are so worried about losing their position. I mean, and this is something that is crucial for the Caribbean to embrace and to really see how we can advance dramatically in helping the private sector embrace the digital technology. In terms of Compete Caribbean, we are supporting, Compete Caribbean is a private sector development program. It's funded by the Inter-American Development Bank, by the UK's Department for International Development, and by the Caribbean Development Bank. We support governments and the private sector across 13 territories. Some of them are not members of the bank, like the Eastern Caribbean countries. And we support governments to come up with better business climate reforms, build institutions, also related to embracing the digital economy. And from the point of view of working with the firms, we are both working with existing firms so that they can adopt digital technology, hopefully through innovation agencies that we're helping to sprout in the region. And also technology extension services. We hope to pilot some technology extension services that can help existing firms adopt digital technology. And then the third one is, depending on the funding that we get, we may even act within the entrepreneurial space. So how to stimulate startups in the digital economy space.
Wonderful.
So that's what we do.
Wonderful. Well, I'm being let know that we're out of time right now, and this is all for today. We hope you enjoyed it, and I would like to especially thank Sylvia Donert and Marjorie Straw for being with us here today, and especially to thank you, our audience, for joining us at this time. I do want to remind you, if you want to learn more about Compete Caribbean, please visit our website, competecaribbean.com, and also sign up for the IDB's iLab blog, where you can find out more information about what we're doing, and also, especially since we weren't able to get to all the questions today, we'll make sure we get you through those blog posts. So sign up, subscribe, and we look forward to our interaction with you. Thank you for your time, and we hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Thanks.
Bye.